Hollis hated diplomatic receptions, not because of the tedious small talk, though that was certainly a factor, or the watered-down beverages that tasted like recycled Starship coolant. No, she hated them because standing around pretending to be interested in trade tariffs made her feet hurt, and these particular shoes were killing her. But here she was, anyway, glass of something vaguely blue in hand, nodding along as a Uxmari delegate chittered about import regulations. The Uxmari looked like a praying mantis had a baby with a lobster, and it smelled faintly of burned sugar. Hollis kept her smile pleasant and her posture relaxed, the very picture of a bored mid-level bureaucrat who'd rather be anywhere else. Which, honestly, wasn't far from the truth. Pinnacle 6 was one of those massive orbital stations that tried too hard to impress, all gleaming corridors and unnecessary fountains that recycled the same water in increasingly elaborate patterns. Humanity had only gotten access to this particular hub 6 months ago, a grudging allowance from the Galactic Commerce Collective after decades of knocking on the door like persistent door-to-door salespeople. The galaxy, as it turned out, had opinions about humans, most of them unflattering. Too young, too aggressive, too emotional, too human. Never mind that humanity had clawed its way from cave paintings to faster-than-light travel in a cosmic eye blink. The established species, the ones who'd been cruising between stars while humans were still figuring out fire, looked at Earth's representatives the way elderly country club members might regard crashers at their garden party. Polite disdain wrapped in diplomatic niceties. Hollis took a sip of her drink and immediately regretted it. Yep, definitely recycled coolant. She let her gaze drift across the reception hall, cataloging faces and positions with the kind of casual precision that came from too many years in intelligence work. Kelborn delegates clustered near the viewport, their crystalline bodies catching and refracting the starlight in ways that would have been beautiful if Hollis wasn't busy calculating sight lines. The Dalthex contingent occupied the center of the room, telepathic merchants who never quite looked at you directly because they were too busy reading surface thoughts. Hollis had taken medication to muddy her mental broadcasts, leaving them with nothing but static and occasional fragments of grocery lists. Always fun to watch their faces when they hit the wall of milk, eggs, ammunition, bread. And there, surrounded by a careful arrangement of bodyguards who were definitely not just bodyguards, stood Ambassador Luxbien. The Kelborn diplomat sparkled like a cathedral window, all geometric facets and refracted light. Beautiful, dignified, and completely unaware that someone very much wanted them dead. Well, probably unaware. With Kelborn, it was hard to tell. They didn't have faces in the UIB traditional sense, just shifting patterns of light within their crystalline structures. Hollis checked her chronometer without being obvious about it. 1,800 hours. Still 3 hours until the projected window. Plenty of time to look harmless and uninteresting. You seem distracted. The voice came from her left, human, male, with an accent that suggested military academy followed by corporate polish. Hollis turned, already knowing who she'd see. Miles. Because, of course, it was Miles. He looked like someone had ordered a spy from a catalog. Tall, symmetrical features, expensive suit that fit just a little too well. His smile was the kind that didn't reach his eyes, and his eyes were the kind that cataloged exits and weapons before bothering with pleasantries. "Just thinking about how much I hate these shoes," Hollis said, matching his superficial pleasantness with her own. "Occupational hazard," Miles replied, moving to stand beside her in a way that looked casual, but put him at the perfect angle to watch both her and the room. "Funny running into you here." "Hilarious," Hollis agreed. Almost like we're both professionals attending a major diplomatic event. Almost like that, Miles echoed, his tone suggesting he knew damn well why she was here, and she probably knew why he was here. And wasn't it all just a delightful coincidence? It absolutely was not. Hollis had read Miles's file 3 times. Twice officially, once unofficially after breaking into a database she definitely wasn't supposed to access. Former military intelligence, transitioned to private security, currently employed by… Well, that's where things got murky. His official credentials said he was with Olympus Strategic Solutions, a corporate protection outfit with a pristine reputation. His unofficial activities suggested he was willing to take contracts from anyone with enough credits and flexible morals. "I'm here to ensure Ambassador Luxbien's safety," Miles said, not bothering with subtlety. "Official channels? Full authorization? I assume you have similar concerns?" "I'm just here for the canapes," Hollis said. "Though between you and me, they're terrible. I think that one is supposed to be cheese, but it tastes like regret." Miles's smile tightened fractionally. Point to Hollis. "Right. Well, if you happen to notice anything unusual, professionally speaking, I'd appreciate the heads up. Interagency cooperation and all that." "Absolutely," Hollis lied. "Cooperation is my middle name?" It wasn't. Her middle name was Margaret, after a grandmother who'd survived 2 wars and a plague by being, in her own words, too ornery to die. Hollis figured she'd inherited that particular trait. Miles drifted away, probably to look important and vigilant near the ambassador's security detail. Hollis watched him go, running calculations. His presence here complicated things, but not unexpectedly. Commander Hugh had warned her there might be other players in this particular game. Commander Hugh Blackstone, her handler, mentor, and the closest thing to a father figure she'd allow herself to acknowledge, had briefed her 6 days ago in a secure room that smelled like coffee and paranoia. "Phantom Collective," Hugh had said, sliding a data chip across the table. "They've been hired to kill Ambassador Luxbian during the reception." Hollis had picked up the chip, already knowing she wasn't going to like what was on it. Hired by whom? That's the fun part. We don't know. Could be the Dalthex, could be a Kelborn rival faction, could be someone we haven't even identified yet. What we do know is that the Phantom Collective doesn't miss. "There's a first time for everything," Hollis had said. Hugh had given her one of his looks, the kind that suggested he was both proud and worried, usually in equal measure. "They use phase shift technology. Dimensional fold teleportation. Short range, but precise. They appear, strike, and vanish before anyone knows what happened." Sounds expensive. Extremely. Which tells us whoever wants Luxbian dead has resources and motivation in abundance. Hollis had loaded the chip into her personal reader, scanning through assassination records. The Phantom Collective had a success rate that would make any professional envious and any target terrified. 18 confirmed kills in the last 5 years, each one impossibly clean. "Why us?" she'd asked. "Why send a human operative against interdimensional assassins?" Hugh had smiled then, the kind of smile that explained why he'd survived 40 years in intelligence work. "Because we have something they don't expect. We have you." Back in the present, Hollis finished her terrible drink and set the glass on a passing service drone. She moved through the crowd with practiced ease, exchanging pleasantries in 3 different languages. Well, 2 languages, and 1 series of harmonic tones that the Uxmari considered polite conversation. Her position in the room wasn't random. Nothing about Hollis was random. She'd spent the last 6 days studying everything about this reception. Blueprints, security protocols, guest lists, even the catering schedule. She'd analyzed the lighting patterns, air circulation, and acoustic properties of the hall. She'd hacked into the station's sensor network, illegally. But what were they going to do? Arrest her after she saved the ambassador? And mapped every energy signature and dimensional fluctuation for 3 decks in every direction. Didn't have phase shift technology. They didn't have telepathy or crystalline bodies or centuries of spacefaring experience. What humans had was something far more useful. A paranoid, pattern-recognizing brain that had evolved to spot predators in tall grass and assassins in crowded rooms. Give a human enough data and enough motivation, and they'd find connections that quantum computers missed. Hollis had found 17 possible assassination vectors. She'd eliminated 12 based on probability matrices. Too exposed, too complicated, wrong angles. That left 5 possibilities, each one mapped to specific timeframes based on crowd flow, security rotations, and the assassin's likely approach vectors. And here was the beautiful part. The part that made Hollis almost smile despite her aching feet. She'd narrowed it down to a 6-minute window, starting at 2100 hours. Phase shift technology left traces. Tiny dimensional ripples that most species couldn't detect because they weren't looking for them. But Hollis had access to sensor data from every Phantom Collective assassination in the last decade. Don't ask how. Hugh had connections in uncomfortable places, and she'd noticed a pattern. The assassins always scouted. Always. Tiny phase shifts in the days leading up to the hit, mapping the location, testing security responses, and those scouts left signatures, faint but detectable if you knew what to look for and had access to sufficiently sensitive equipment. Hollis had found 3 scout signatures in the last 60 hours, all clustering around specific locations in the reception hall. Overlay those with security gaps, sightline calculations, and the cultural preferences of known Phantom Collective members. They liked drama, liked the impossible shot that made people tell stories afterwards. And you got a very specific kill zone, right behind where she was planning to stand at 2100 hours. Brilliant party, isn't it? Hollis turned to find a Kelborn junior diplomat, light patterns suggesting polite interest. She engaged in conversation about trade agreements and cultural exchange, all while her internal clock ticked down. 1830. 2.5 hours. Plenty of time to be boring and forgettable. Plenty of time to let everyone, Miles included, think she was just another bureaucrat enjoying terrible drinks and worse conversation. Because when the assassin teleported directly behind her back, she needed everyone to be surprised. Everyone except her. She'd already chosen her weapon. Not a gun. Too obvious. Too human. Something more elegant. A ceramic blade, molecularly sharpened, completely undetectable by standard security scans. It was currently hidden in a modified hairpin, which was itself hidden in her carefully arranged hair. Humans had been hiding weapons in jewelry since before they'd invented writing. Some traditions were worth maintaining. Hollis smiled at the Kelborn diplomat, nodded at something about tariff structures, and waited. Patience was a hunter's virtue, and tonight she was very much hunting. The thing about being underestimated, the real advantage of being the newcomer species that everyone dismissed, was that nobody expected you to be 3 moves ahead. They saw primitive emotions and short lifespans, never bothering to consider that those same traits might make humans very, very good at a specific kind of strategic thinking. The kind that kept you alive when something with better technology wanted you dead. Hollis checked her chronometer again. 2 hours, 28 minutes. She could wait. 1900 hours, rolled around with the inevitability of bad decisions and hangovers? Hollis had positioned herself near a decorative pillar, some architectural nonsense that served no structural purpose but gave the reception hall an air of imported grandeur. She was engaged in what could generously be called a conversation with a Dalthex merchant who kept trying to read her thoughts and getting nothing but her medication-induced mental static. The frustration radiating off the telepathic alien was almost worth the headache the pills gave her. "Your species is, difficult to read," the Dalthex said, its voice like wind chimes in a minor key. "We're a complicated people," Hollis replied, taking another sip of a different terrible drink. This one tasted like someone had mixed fruit juice with industrial solvent. "Lots of surface noise, anxiety mostly, and grocery lists." The Dalthex made a sound that might have been laughter or might have been disgust. Hard to tell with a species that communicated partially through telepathy and partially through interpretive humming. Across the room, Miles was doing his best impression of a competent security professional. He'd attached himself to Ambassador Luxbian's detail, all crisp efficiency and watchful eyes. Too watchful, actually. He kept glancing at Hollis, then away, then back again. A pattern that suggested he was either attracted to her or suspicious of her. Given the context, probably the latter. Hollis mentally reviewed what she knew about Miles. Born on Europa Station, military family, decorated service record with just enough redacted sections to be interesting. He'd left official channels 8 months ago after what the files called philosophical differences regarding operational parameters, which was corporate speak for wouldn't follow orders he disagreed with. Noble, maybe. Or maybe just difficult. His current employer, Olympus Strategic Solutions, had a reputation for hiring competent people with flexible ethics. They didn't ask too many questions about methods as long as results matched projections. Miles had worked 6 contracts for them, all successful, all just barely within legal boundaries. But here was the interesting part. The part that had made Hollis's instincts start screaming. Miles had been hired for this assignment 36 hours ago. Rush job, premium rates, and the contract had come through a shell corporation with ties to, well, that's where the trail went cold. Hugh's intelligence network had managed to crack 2 layers of corporate obfuscation before hitting encryption that would have taken weeks to break, which meant someone with serious resources wanted Miles here, wanted him protecting or appearing to protect Ambassador Luxbien. Hollis didn't believe in coincidences. Not in this business. She excused herself from the Dalthex, who seemed relieved to stop trying to read a mind that apparently broadcast nothing but white noise and the occasional recipe for pasta. Moving through the crowd required a delicate balance, purposeful enough not to seem aimless, casual enough not to seem suspicious. Just another bored bureaucrat, counting down the minutes until she could leave. Except she wasn't counting down. She was counting up. Calculating probabilities, adjusting her position based on crowd flow, monitoring the ambassador's movements. Luxbien was holding court near the central viewport, surrounded by admirers and sycophants who wanted access to Kelborn trade routes. The peace treaty Luxbien was negotiating would open up resource-rich systems that had been contested for decades. Lots of people stood to gain from that treaty. Lots of people stood to lose even more. "You keep moving," Miles said, appearing beside her with the kind of timing that was either coincidence or deliberate. "Nervous?" "Bored," Hollis corrected. "These things always run long. I'm debating whether to fake a medical emergency or just accept my fate." "I could arrange a distraction," Miles offered, his tone suggesting he was joking, but his eyes suggesting he wasn't. Tempting. but I should probably stay. Professional obligations and all that tedious responsibility." Miles studied her for a moment, and Hollis could practically see the calculations running behind his eyes. He was trying to figure her out, categorize her, decide if she was a threat or an asset or just background noise. Good luck with that, she thought. She'd spent years perfecting the art of being underestimated. "You're not what you seem," Miles said finally. "Few people are," Hollis replied. "That's what makes parties interesting." He opened his mouth to respond, but a commotion near the ambassadors' group interrupted them. One of the bodyguards, a hulking Kelborn who looked like a geometric avalanche, was having what appeared to be a quiet argument with a Uxmari delegate who'd gotten too close. Miles tensed, hand moving fractionally toward where Hollis knew he kept a weapon. Professional reflexes. Instant threat assessment. Whatever else Miles was, he was good at his job, which made him dangerous. Hollis watched the situation resolve itself. The Uxmari backed off, the bodyguard relaxed. Ambassador Luxpian continued sparkling conversationally. Just a minor diplomatic hiccup, nothing worth remembering. But Hollis noticed something interesting. During the commotion, Miles hadn't moved to help. He'd tensed, assessed, but stayed exactly where he was, watching her. "Jumpy security," Hollis commented. "Can you blame them?" Miles asked. "Lots of expensive people in one room. Makes certain professionals opportunistic." "Professionals like the Phantom Collective?" Hollis asked, keeping her voice light, conversational. Miles went very still. "What do you know about the Phantom Collective?" "Only what everyone knows. Interdimensional assassins, perfect success rate, absurdly expensive. The kind of thing people whisper about at parties like this." She paused. "Why? Should I be worried?" "No," Miles said, but his tone suggested yes. "Just making conversation." Hollis checked her chronometer. 19:45. 75 minutes until showtime. "Well, this has been illuminating, but I need to find better drinks. These taste like the bartender has a grudge against organic life." She drifted away before Miles could respond, navigating through clusters of diplomats and merchants. Her path looked random. Stop here to exchange pleasantries with a Uxmari trader. Pause there to admire the view from the viewport. But each movement brought her closer to her predetermined position. The spot where she'd be standing at 2100 hours. The spot where phase shift signatures had clustered during scout runs. The spot where an assassin would appear, expecting an easy target from behind. It had a saying, "Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me." The Phantom Collective had fooled 18 targets. They weren't about to fool a 19th. Because here was what the galaxy's established species didn't understand about humans. Humanity had survived ice ages and plagues, predators and wars, disasters both natural and self-inflicted. They'd done it without telepathy, or phase shift technology, or crystalline immortality. They'd done it with pattern recognition, tool use, and a paranoid certainty that something was always trying to kill them. Usually they were right. Hollis had studied every Phantom Collective assassination. Not just the official reports, those were sanitized, useless, but the raw data. Sensor logs, witness statements, crime scene analyses. She'd mapped dimensional fluctuations, calculated approach vectors, built probability models that would have made a quantum computer jealous. And she'd found the pattern. The beautiful, predictable pattern that the collective thought was randomness. They always struck from behind. Always. It was psychological. The intimacy of it, the violation of appearing in someone's blind spot. Theatrical and terrifying. Which was exactly the point. Fear was part of the brand. They always chose positions with dramatic sightlines. The collective wanted witnesses, wanted the story of the impossible kill to spread. Marketing through horror. And they always scouted first. Those tiny phase shifts days before the hit, mapping the environment, finding the perfect spot. Which meant Hollis could predict them, could be waiting, could turn their own methodology into a trap. 200 hours. 1 hour. Hollis positioned herself exactly where she needed to be, back to a corner that wasn't really a corner. Open space behind her that would be perfect for a phase shift insertion. She engaged a Kelborn merchant in discussion about import duties, keeping her posture relaxed, vulnerable, completely undefended, except for the ceramic blade hidden in her hair, and the 6 days of planning that had led to this moment, and the cold certainty that when reality rippled behind her, she'd already be moving. Miles watched from across the room. Ambassador Luxbien sparkled obliviously nearby. The reception continued, all polite conversation and diplomatic theater. 60 minutes until someone tried to kill the ambassador. 60 minutes until Hollis showed the galaxy what humans did best. They adapted. They predicted. They won. Her chronometer ticked forward. 59 minutes. Hollis smiled and waited for the universe to make its move. 2100 hours arrived with mathematical precision and absolutely zero fanfare. Hollis was precisely where she needed to be, engaged in what had to be the most mind-numbing conversation of her entire career. A Uxmari trade inspector was explaining, in excruciating detail, the complexities of agricultural export regulations between systems. The chittering translation was making her teeth ache. But she nodded along, maintaining eye contact, looking for all the world like someone who actually cared about grain tariffs. Behind her, empty space, just air and architectural ambiance and the faint hum of the station's environmental systems. Anyone watching would see a human bureaucrat, back exposed, completely unaware of her surroundings. They'd be wrong. Hollis had spent the last 15 minutes in a state of hyper-awareness that would have exhausted most people. Every nerve was calibrated, every sense heightened. She'd mapped the air currents in the room. Phase shifts caused minute atmospheric disturbances and tracked the ambient noise levels. Her right hand rested casually near her hair, fingers positioned exactly where they needed to be to reach the ceramic blade. She looked relaxed. She was anything but. The Uxmari droned on about moisture content regulations. Hollis made appropriate noises of agreement. Her internal clock counted down. 5 seconds. 4. 3. Reality shivered. It wasn't visible, not exactly. More like a feeling, that sensation of pressure change before a storm, or the static charge before lightning. The air behind Hollis rippled, dimensional fabric folding in ways physics didn't typically allow. 2 seconds. Most people wouldn't have noticed. Most people would have died confused. Hollis was not most people. She was already moving as the assassin materialized. Her hand flashed to her hair, fingers closing on the modified hairpin. The ceramic blade came free with practiced ease as she spun, body rotating with the kind of speed that came from muscle memory and adrenaline, and the absolute certainty that hesitation meant death. The assassin was Ixoth, shadow dwellers, species that evolved in caves so deep that darkness was a survival trait. This one was male, judging by the bone ridges, and tall, nearly 2 meters of whipcord muscle and killing intent. His blade was already moving toward where her spine had been a fraction of a second earlier. Except her spine wasn't there anymore. Hollis completed her turn, blade extended, edge finding the soft tissue of the assassin's throat with the precision of 6 days' planning, and a lifetime of paranoid preparation. She didn't press hard enough to cut. Not yet. But the message was clear. Move and die. The assassin froze. Absolutely, completely froze. His eyes, black on black, adapted for seeing in absolute darkness, widened in what Hollis recognized as shock. Pure, undiluted shock that his target had not only anticipated his arrival, but had been waiting for him. "Hello," Hollis said pleasantly, as if they'd met at a coffee shop instead of a mutual attempt at murder. "I've been expecting you." The reception hall erupted into chaos. Screaming, the Uxmari were particularly good at that, and sudden movement as bodyguards surged forward and diplomats scrambled for cover. Security klaxons started blaring, red lights strobing across crystalline walls. But Hollis barely noticed. Her entire focus was on the assassin frozen at knife point, and the micro-calculations running through her head about whether he'd try something stupid. "Umbakai," she said, using the name Hugh's intelligence had provided. "Member of the Phantom Collective, 18 confirmed kills, specialty in high-value political targets. Did I miss anything?" The assassin's voice was like gravel sliding down a cliff face. "How? How did I know you were coming?" Hollis smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "You people are predictable. Brilliant, efficient, terrifying, and predictable. You scout your locations. Those phase shifts leave traces. Faint ones, sure, but traces nonetheless. I mapped them, calculated probability vectors, and figured out exactly where and when you'd appear." "Impossible," Umbakai hissed. "No species has countered our methods." "No species bothered looking for patterns," Hollis corrected. "You've been successful for so long that you stopped adapting, started believing your own marketing. That's the problem with a perfect success rate. Makes you sloppy." Security was closing in now, weapons drawn, shouting commands in multiple languages. But Hollis didn't move, and neither did Umbakai. They were locked in a tableau of mutual threat assessment, both calculating odds and outcomes. "Lower the blade, human," one of the security officers barked. Kelborn, voice like crystal chimes, pitched for command. "In a moment," Hollis called back, not taking her eyes off the assassin. "We're having a professional conversation." "You cannot hold me," Umbakai said quietly. "Phase shift technology allows short-range dimensional folding. Yes, I know. Approximately 15 meters maximum range, 3-second recharge time, and it leaves you disoriented for 0.2 seconds after materialization." Hollis tilted her head. "That's how I had time to turn. You were still in reorientation when I moved. Biological limitation of your technology." The assassin's expression shifted from shock to something that might have been respect, might have been fury. With Ixoth facial structures, it was hard to tell. "Who hired you?" Hollis asked. "Professional confidentiality is about to be the least of your problems. Security's going to want answers. So am I. And I'm the one currently holding a very sharp blade to your carotid artery." She paused. "Well, your equivalent of a carotid artery. I studied Ixoth anatomy. Know exactly where to cut." Before Umbakai could respond, a new voice cut through the chaos. "Hollis, stand down." Miles. Of course it was Miles. He pushed through the security cordon with the kind of authority that came from excellent forged credentials or genuine clearance. Probably both. His weapon was drawn but pointed at the floor, professional posture suggesting he was here to help. Hollis's instincts screamed otherwise. "This is under control," she said, not moving. "Clearly." Miles moved closer, eyes flicking between her and the assassin. "But you're creating an international incident. Lower the weapon. Let security handle this." Security didn't stop him from getting this far, Hollis pointed out. I did. And you've done excellent work. Now step back and let the professionals finish the job. Something in his tone set off every alarm bell Hollis had spent years calibrating. Too smooth, too insistent, too focused on getting her away from Umbakai. She ran the calculations in her head. Miles's sudden appearance, his positioning between her and the ambassador, his weapon, ostensibly pointed at the floor, but angled in a way that could shift to a threat in microseconds. Oh, you clever bastard, she thought. Miles, she said conversationally, when exactly were you hired for this assignment? His expression didn't change. 36 hours ago. Why? Just curious about timing. See, the Phantom Collective was hired 6 days ago. Their scout run started 4 days ago. But you only showed up recently. Your point? My point, Hollis said, shifting her position fractionally, still holding Umbakai, but angling herself to watch Miles better, is that you're not here to protect the ambassador. You're here to make sure the job gets done. The reception hall went very quiet. Even the security officers paused, weapons still trained, but attention suddenly riveted on the new accusation hanging in the air. Miles's pleasant expression cracked. Just slightly. Just enough. That's a serious allegation, he said. It's a serious situation, Hollis countered. Here's what I think happened. Someone hired the Phantom Collective to kill Ambassador Luxbian. Standard operating procedure for expensive, high-profile hits. But whoever hired them wanted insurance, wanted a backup, plan in case something went wrong. Nothing goes wrong with the collective, Umbakai muttered, sounding offended. Quiet, you, Hollis said. The adults are talking. She focused on Miles. So they hired you. Different approach, different methodology. You show up as official security, get close to the target, and if the collective's attempt fails, well, accidents happen. Bodyguards mistake threats. Weapons discharge in confusion. Miles's weapon shifted. Not much, maybe 30 degrees. Now pointed somewhere between the floor and Hollis. You're paranoid, he said. Occupational requirement, Hollis agreed. But I'm also right. You've been watching me all night, trying to figure out if I was a threat to your operation. When you couldn't get a read on me, you stayed close, waited, and when the assassin appeared, you saw your opportunity. To do what, exactly? To finish the job while everyone's distracted. Kill the ambassador in the chaos. Blame it on the Phantom Collective, or their mysterious human who somehow knew they were coming. Frame it as a tragic failure of security. Hollis smiled. Except I'm not distracted. I'm very, very focused. Security was moving now, repositioning to cover both threats. Ambassador Luxbian had been evacuated. Smart move. And the remaining diplomats were being ushered toward exits. The reception had officially become a crime scene. Miles made his decision. Hollis saw it in his eyes, the shift from calculation to commitment. His weapon started to rise. Smooth, professional, trained movement. He was fast. Hollis was faster. She released Umbakai with her left hand, ceramic blade still at his throat, but body already pivoting. Her right hand snapped out, striking Miles's wrist with the edge of her palm. Precise hit on the nerve cluster that caused temporary paralysis. His weapon clattered to the floor. But Miles wasn't done. He was trained, experienced, dangerous. His other hand came up in a close-quarters strike aimed at her throat. Hollis blocked, redirected, and drove her knee into his solar plexus. He gasped, stumbled back, and Umbakai phase shifted. The assassin disappeared in a ripple of displaced reality, probably teleporting to a pre-planned escape route. Security shouted, sensors screamed, but he was gone. Hollis let him go. She had bigger problems. Miles recovered faster than she'd expected, combat training overriding pain. He lunged for his dropped weapon, fingers closing on the grip. Security opened fire. Not at Hollis, at Miles. Stun rounds, thank God, but enough of them to drop an elephant. Miles jerked, convulsed, and collapsed in a twitching heap. The Kelborn security officer approached cautiously. "You have excellent instincts, human." "Thanks," Hollis said, breathing hard. "Can I put my knife away now, or is someone else going to try to kill somebody?" "Please do," the officer said, "and then you will explain everything." Hollis slid the ceramic blade back into its hairpin disguise. Her hands were shaking, adrenaline crash, perfectly normal response to almost dying. "Happy to explain," she said, "right after someone gets me a drink that doesn't taste like industrial waste." Ambassador Luxpian's light patterns flickered, probably the Kelborn equivalent of laughter. "I believe," the ambassador said, voice like wind through crystal, "that can be arranged." The debriefing room on Pinnacle 6 was exactly as depressing as Hollis had expected. Gray walls, harsh lighting, uncomfortable chairs designed by someone who hated spines. She sat across from Commander Hugh, who looked simultaneously proud and exasperated, which was basically his default expression when dealing with her. "You couldn't have just called for backup?" Hugh asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "Backup would have spooked them," Hollis said, accepting the cup of actual coffee he'd brought. Real Earth coffee, not the station's synthetic approximation. She took a sip and nearly wept with gratitude. The Phantom Collective monitors security channels. Any unusual activity, any increased presence, and they abort. Then they try again later when we're not ready. So instead, you decided to stand there like bait and hope your calculations were correct. "They were correct," Hollis pointed out. "I'm still alive. Ambassador Luxpian is still alive. Miles is in custody. I'd call that a successful operation." Hugh rubbed his temples. "Miles is claiming he was trying to protect you when security opened fire. Says your accusations were paranoid speculation." "Of course he is. Did you check his financials?" "We did." Hugh slid a datapad across the table. 3 payments from shell corporations in the last month. Total value. Enough to retire comfortably on a core world. The money trail leads back to a Dalthex merchant consortium that stands to lose significant market share if the peace treaty goes through. Hollis scanned the data, nodding. So they hired both the Collective and Miles. Belt and suspenders approach. Smart, if you're morally bankrupt. Miles is still maintaining his innocence. Says the payments were for legitimate security work on other contracts. Then why did he aim his weapon at me during a crisis situation? Hollis asked. Security footage should show his movements. He wasn't protecting anyone. He was positioning for a shot. Security footage is being analyzed, Hugh confirmed. Preliminary review supports your version of events. Miles's weapon trajectory was inconsistent with defensive posture. Told you. Pattern recognition. Hollis took another sip of coffee. What about Umbakai? Hugh's expression darkened. Escaped. Phase shifted through 6 bulkheads before we could track him. He's off station by now, probably halfway to Phantom Collective headquarters to explain how a human civilian predicted his entire operation. He won't try again, though, Hollis said. I damaged his, professional reputation. The Collective's whole brand is impossibility. Unstoppable assassins who can't be countered. I countered him, made him look ordinary. You humiliated one of the galaxy's most dangerous assassins, Hugh corrected. That's either brilliantly strategic or catastrophically stupid, and I haven't decided which. Can't it be both? Hugh didn't answer, but his expression suggested yes. It absolutely could be both, and that was exactly the problem with Hollis's approach to intelligence work. A chime at the door interrupted them. Hugh called entry clearance, and Ambassador Luxpian flowed into the room, literal flowing, since Kelborn moved like sentient liquid crystal. "Commander, Operative Hollis." The ambassador's voice resonated with harmonics that suggested genuine warmth. "I wanted to express personal gratitude before departing for the treaty signing." "Just doing my job, Ambassador," Hollis said, standing. "Protocol dictated showing respect to diplomatic personnel, even when you were exhausted and your feet still hurt." "You did considerably more than your job," Luxpian countered. "You anticipated an attack that our own security missed. You identified a threat within the protection detail itself, and you accomplished all of this while appearing to be, forgive me, a harmless bureaucrat." "I get that a lot," Hollis said. "Comes with being human. Everyone underestimates us. A mistake we will not repeat." Luxpian's light patterns shifted. Amusement, maybe. "The Kelborn Collective has authorized a formal commendation for your service. It will be noted in your species' diplomatic file," which meant humanity just earned points with one of the galaxy's most influential civilizations. Hollis tried not to think about the political ramifications. That was Hugh's problem. After the ambassador departed, Hugh leaned back in his chair and studied Hollis with the expression he got when he was deciding whether to praise or lecture. "You took an enormous risk," he said finally. "Calculated risk," Hollis corrected. "I ran the numbers. Probability of success was 68%. 68% means you had a nearly 1 in 3 chance of dying. Better than the ambassador's odds without intervention. Those were about 12% survival if the Phantom Collective made their attempt unopposed." Hugh sighed. "You know what bothers me most? You're actually right. Your methodology was sound. Your execution was flawless. You saved lives and prevented a diplomatic catastrophe." He paused. "I hate that I can't argue with your results." "Then don't," Hollis suggested. "Give me a vacation instead. Somewhere with beaches, or at least somewhere with chairs that don't hate my spine." "Vacation denied. We have 6 new situations that require your particular brand of paranoid brilliance." "Of course you do." Hollis finished her coffee. "Can I at least get better shoes?" "Requisition approved." 3 decks, away, in a cell that was technically comfortable but absolutely secure, Miles sat in silence. He'd stopped protesting his innocence when the financial evidence became overwhelming. Now he just stared at the wall, calculating the prison sentence he was facing. Conspiracy to commit assassination of a diplomatic official. Attempted murder. Espionage. The list went on. Decades behind force fields, minimum. All because a human he'd dismissed as background noise had been 3 steps ahead the entire time. 5 systems away, on a ship running dark and quiet, Umbakai sat in his quarters and composed a message to the Phantom Collective's council. "Mark humans as unpredictable threats," he wrote. "Recommend tripling rates for any contracts involving them, possibly quadrupling. They lack advanced technology, but possess tactical intuition that borders on precognitive. They see patterns. They plan contingencies. They expect the worst and prepare accordingly." He paused, considering his next words carefully. "The human Hollis anticipated my arrival position, timing, and approach vector. She was waiting with a blade before I completed materialization. This should have been impossible. It was not." Another pause. Professional pride warred with professional honesty. The Phantom Collective's reputation remains intact only because I escaped. Our methods require reassessment when operating in human-occupied space. They do not think like other species. They think like predators who spent millennia assuming something was hunting them. He transmitted the message and sat back, replaying the moment when he'd materialized behind Hollis. The moment when she'd already been moving, already known, already won. 18 successful assassinations. One perfect failure. He'd never take another contract involving humans. Not for any amount of credits. Some species were too dangerous to hunt, regardless of technological disadvantages. Back on Pinnacle 6, Hollis returned to her quarters and collapsed on a bed that was marginally more comfortable than the chairs. Her feet screamed gratitude as she kicked off the terrible shoes. 6 days of planning. 3 hours of waiting. 15 seconds of execution. All to prove something the galaxy kept forgetting. Humans didn't need telepathy or phase shift technology or crystalline bodies. They had something better. Millions of years of evolution that had selected for paranoia, pattern recognition, and the absolute conviction that something was always trying to kill them. Usually, they were right. Hollis closed her eyes and allowed herself a small smile. Somewhere out there, assassins were recalculating their rates. Security agencies were analyzing her methods. Diplomats were revising their opinions about humanity's capabilities. All because she'd paid attention, noticed patterns, made predictions, and stood her ground when reality rippled behind her back. Not bad for a species that had only been playing in the Galactic sandbox for 6 months. Her communicator chimed. Hugh, of course. What now? She asked. Rest up. His voice crackled through the speaker. Next assignment briefing in 18 hours. You said I could have better shoes. Better shoes are waiting in requisitions. Hollis? Yeah? Excellent work. Genuinely excellent. Even if you nearly gave me a heart attack. All part of the service, Commander. She ended the call and stared at the ceiling. Somewhere in the galaxy, species with better technology and longer histories were learning a valuable lesson. Never underestimate the species that spent its entire evolution expecting the worst. Because humans didn't just survive the worst, they planned for it, predicted it, and occasionally kicked it in the teeth. Hollis smiled and let exhaustion pull her toward sleep. Tomorrow would bring new problems, new threats, new calculations. Tonight, she'd earned rest, and really good shoes. 6 weeks after the incident on Pinnacle 6, the Galactic Commerce Collective held its quarterly security conference. Representatives from 40 species gathered to discuss threat assessments, emerging dangers, and best practices for diplomatic protection. The Phantom Collective wasn't invited, obviously. But everyone was talking about them anyway. Specifically, they were talking about how a single human operative had done what no security force in the galaxy had managed. Predict and counter a Phantom Collective assassination attempt before it happened. The leaked footage, and nobody knew who'd leaked it, though Hollis had her suspicions Hugh was involved, showed the entire sequence. Hollis standing casually, back exposed, reality rippling. Her impossibly fast turn, blade already moving. The assassin frozen, completely outmaneuvered. It played on repeat in tactical academies across known space. Species that had dismissed humanity as lucky primitives were suddenly requesting joint training exercises. Security firms were hiring human consultants at premium rates. The phrase human intuition entered the galactic lexicon as shorthand for paranoid but effective threat assessment. Hollis watched the news coverage from her apartment on Europa Station, feet up, wearing the most comfortable shoes she'd ever owned. You had come through on that promise, at least. Her communicator buzzed. Message from an unknown sender, routed through so many encryption layers it would take quantum computers months to trace. She opened it anyway. Professional curiosity. Respects from Umbakai. You won our encounter fairly. The collective has updated its operational protocols regarding human targets. We now charge 8 times our standard rate, and most of us simply decline the contracts. You have made my profession significantly more expensive and considerably less certain. Well played. Hollis laughed and deleted the message. Across the galaxy, in diplomatic halls and corporate boardrooms, in military academies and intelligence briefings, the story spread. The story of how humanity, young, technologically disadvantaged, emotionally volatile humanity, had turned their greatest weaknesses into weapons. Pattern recognition born from paranoia. Strategic thinking forged by millennia of predators. The bone-deep certainty that something was always hunting you, so you'd better be ready. Other species had better tools. Humans had better instincts. And in a galaxy that had forgotten to expect the unexpected, that made all the difference. Hollis finished her coffee, filed her mission report, and checked her schedule. 3 new assignments waiting. 6 diplomatic receptions requiring security analysis. 12 requests for consultation from agencies who'd previously ignored human expertise. Not bad for a species that everyone kept underestimating. She smiled and got back to work. The galaxy was learning.